7-year-old Marcus sat alone in the school cafeteria trying to hide his empty lunchbox behind his backpack, his stomach growling as he watched other children enjoy their meals. But what his classmate Emily did next would remind everyone that sometimes the biggest hearts come in the smallest packages. If you believe in the power of children to change the world and want to witness moments that restore your faith in humanity, please subscribe now to join our community that celebrates these precious acts of kindness. Emily had noticed Marcus sitting alone every day, pretending to eat from his empty lunchbox. And even though her own family struggled to make ends meet, she had been secretly packing extra sandwiches all week. But when she finally approached his table that Thursday afternoon, neither child could have imagined how their simple act of sharing would transform not just their lives, but their entire school community. Emily stood in her family's small kitchen early that morning, watching her mother Sarah count out coins for lunch money, the dim light casting shadows across their worn formica table, her mom's nursing scrubs already wrinkled from the night shift. She had just finished at the local hospital. "Here, sweetie," Sarah said, sliding $3 across the table. "Make it last until Friday, okay?" Emily nodded, knowing exactly how precious each quarter was, knowing her mother would skip her own lunch. To ensure her daughter could eat, the apartment was small but clean. Sarah had always made sure of that, working extra shifts to keep them afloat. Since Emily's father had left 2 years ago, Emily watched her mother's tired hands sort through bills, noticed how she set some aside with a small sigh, knew those would have to wait until the next paycheck came in, understood more about adult worries than any 8-year-old should. When Emily first noticed Marcus sitting alone in the cafeteria, she recognized something in the way he held his empty lunchbox, something she had seen in her own reflection. During the months right after her father left, when pride and hunger had waged daily battles in their own kitchen, she watched him pretend to eat, watched him make excuses to his classmates, watched him grow thinner as autumn progressed. Sarah had taught Emily that seeing someone in need meant accepting responsibility for helping. "We might not have much," she would say during their evening meals, "but we always have enough to share." These words echoed in Emily's mind as she watched Marcus day after day, his empty lunchbox becoming a symbol of something she understood too well, something she knew she had to address that evening. As Sarah prepared their simple dinner of pasta and sauce, Emily gathered her courage. "Mom," she began, "could we make extra sandwiches tomorrow?" Sarah paused in her stirring, looked at her daughter with understanding. "Is this about the boy at school? The one you've been worried about?" Emily nodded, surprised, but not really that her mother had noticed. Her concern had sensed her growing preoccupation. They sat together at their small kitchen table, Emily explaining what she had observed, Sarah listening with the patience of someone who knew how it felt to want to help when resources were scarce. "Using your lunch money for two?" she asked finally. Emily nodded again. "Just until Friday," she promised. "Just until we figure out something else." Sarah hugged her daughter, tight pride and worry mixing in her embrace. The next morning, they woke earlier than usual. Sarah showing Emily how to make simple sandwiches. "Special presentation matters," she explained, cutting the crusts off, making shapes that transformed plain bread and cheese into something that felt like love. "When you have little," she said, "you learn to make it beautiful." Emily absorbed these lessons, watching her mother's skilled hands create magic from modest ingredients. Emily carried the extra sandwich carefully that day, her own lunch smaller to accommodate helping Marcus, but her heart fuller with purpose. She watched him from across the cafeteria, saw how he tried to make himself invisible, saw how hunger made him fold into himself, remembered how it felt to need help, remembered how much courage it took to accept it, remembered how kindness could change everything. Sarah had picked up an extra shift at the hospital to help cover the cost of the extra food. Emily knew this, watched her mother prepare for another long night of work, understood that helping others sometimes meant sacrifice, but remembered what Sarah always said, kindness multiplies, it never divides. These words gave her strength. As she planned her approach to Marcus's table between classes, Emily noticed other things about. Marcus noticed how his clothes, though clean, were worn, noticed how he never joined class pizza parties, noticed how he seemed to fade a little more each day. She recognized these signs too, remembered her own experiences, remembered how community had helped them survive, remembered how small acts of kindness had made big differences. Sarah's voice guided her planning. Sometimes she would say, "People need help but can't ask for it." Emily understood this, watched Marcus struggle with pride, watched him battle hunger, watched him try to maintain dignity in the face of need. She knew she would have to be careful, would have to find a way to help. That protected his self-respect, that honored his strength, that acknowledged his worth. During their evening routine of homework and simple dinner, Emily and Sarah discussed strategies. Make it about sharing, Sarah suggested, drawing from her own experiences, both giving and receiving help. Make it about friendship. These words resonated with Emily, who understood instinctively that true kindness required wisdom, required sensitivity, required respect. The small kitchen became a planning center. Sarah teaching Emily more than just how to make sandwiches, teaching her about compassion, about dignity, about how to help without hurting. "You're doing a beautiful thing," she told her daughter as they prepared the next day's lunches. "But remember, helping others helps us too, helps us remember our humanity, helps us grow our hearts." Emily lay awake that night thinking about Marcus, thinking about hunger, thinking about how small acts could make big differences. She remembered the food bank that had helped them during their hardest times, remembered the neighbors who had shared meals, remembered how community had carried them through darkness. She understood now why her mother always said yes when asked to help. Others understood that kindness created circles that grew wider with each act of sharing, because sometimes seeing someone in need meant becoming the help they couldn't ask for. Sometimes understanding hunger meant knowing how to satisfy more than just physical emptiness. Sometimes love meant making extra sandwiches even when your own resources were scarce. And as Emily finally drifted to sleep, the next day's carefully prepared lunch waiting in their small refrigerator, she knew that tomorrow would change everything, knew that small acts of kindness could transform lives, knew that sharing even when you had little could create ripples of change that touched everyone they reached. Thursday's lunch period arrived with the usual chaos of children flooding into the cafeteria. But Emily moved with purpose, the carefully prepared sandwiches secure in her lunch bag. Her mother's words echoing in her mind. Kindness needs courage. "Sweetie, but courage doesn't mean not being scared." She watched Marcus take his usual seat, his empty lunchbox positioned just so his eyes down his shoulders curved as if trying to make himself invisible. Her heart hammered as she approached his table, clutching her lunch bag, remembering how it felt to be hungry, remembering how pride could make accepting help so difficult, remembering her mother's wisdom about making sharing feel natural. "Is this seat taken?" she asked softly. Marcus looked up, startled by the interruption of his solitude, his eyes wary but holding a glimmer of something that might have been hope. Emily sat down, carefully arranging her lunch, taking out the sandwiches her mother had helped her prepare, one cut into a star, the other into a heart. "Mom always makes too much," she said casually, the lie feeling justified by its kindness. "Would you like to share?" She watched Marcus struggle with the offer, saw the battle between hunger and pride play across his face, remembered that same battle from her own experience. I have my lunch," Marcus whispered, gesturing to his empty lunchbox, but his stomach betrayed him with a quiet growl. Emily pretended not to notice, instead chatting about their morning classes, about the upcoming science project, about anything that might make this moment feel more normal. "Mom says food tastes better when shared," she offered. Pushing the heart-shaped sandwich slightly closer, the cafeteria buzzed around them, but at their table time seemed to slow as Marcus looked at the offered sandwich, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for it. "Thank you," he said so quietly. Emily almost missed it, but she saw something relax in his posture, saw some of the tension leave his shoulders, saw the beginning of what might become a smile. They ate together, Emily sharing stories about her mother's creative sandwich-cutting skills, about how food could be made special even when simple, about how sharing made everything taste better. Marcus listened, gradually relaxing, gradually joining the conversation, gradually letting his guard down. "My mom used to make shapes too," he offered, surprising them both. With a small confidence, Emily recognized the past tense, heard the story hidden in those words, remembered her own struggles to talk about changes in family, remembered how sharing food could somehow make sharing feelings easier. "Shapes make everything better," she said gently, validating his memory while respecting his privacy, watching as he took another careful bite of the heart-shaped sandwich across the cafeteria, Mrs. Thompson. Their teacher observed this interaction, her experienced eyes noting both the empty lunchbox and the shared meal, making connections, understanding dawning about Marcus's recent distraction. In class, about his increasing withdrawal, about the subtle signs she had noticed but hadn't fully processed. Until this moment, Emily and Marcus finished their sandwiches together, the simple act of sharing food creating a bridge between their separate struggles, creating a space where understanding could grow, creating the beginning of something that felt like friendship. "Tomorrow Mom's making stars," Emily said as they packed up their lunch things. "She always makes extra." Marcus met her eyes, briefly nodded once, a gesture small but significant. After school, Emily walked home, her empty lunch bag feeling lighter than usual, her heart full with the knowledge that she had done something important, something meaningful, something that would make her mother proud. Sarah listened to her daughter's account of the day over their simple dinner of soup and crackers. "You did good, sweetie," she said softly. "You did real good." They spent the evening preparing the next day's lunches, Sarah showing Emily how to make pinwheel sandwiches, teaching her how presentation could make simple food feel special, teaching her how love could be expressed through small details. "Tomorrow we'll make enough for both of you," she said, despite the bills piled on their counter, despite the extra shift she would need to pick up. Despite their own tight circumstances, Marcus went home that day, feeling something he hadn't felt in weeks, something that went beyond the simple satisfaction of a full stomach, something that felt like hope. He watched his father search through empty cupboards, watched him worry over past due notices, watched him carry the weight of a single parent trying to provide, but for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt less alone, because sometimes sharing a sandwich meant sharing strength. Sometimes accepting help meant accepting friendship. Sometimes small acts of kindness could open doors to bigger changes. And as Emily and Marcus both lay in their separate beds that night, both thinking about lunch, both feeling the first stirrings of friendship, both understanding that something important had begun, they couldn't know how their simple interaction would grow, couldn't know how many lives it would touch, couldn't know how their small moment of sharing would transform their entire school community. Mrs. Thompson sat at her kitchen table that evening, thinking about what she had witnessed, thinking about the quiet dignity of children facing adult problems, thinking about how communities could fail and succeed their most vulnerable members. She began making plans, began considering resources, began imagining ways to support what Emily had started understanding, that sometimes children led the way in teaching adults about compassion, about courage, about change, because sometimes the smallest actions could trigger the largest changes. Sometimes the simplest sharing could inspire the greatest giving. Sometimes two children's lunch could become a catalyst for community transformation. And as Thursday turned to Friday, as Emily prepared for another day of sharing, as Marcus prepared for another day of friendship. As their story began to unfold, none of them could imagine how far these ripples would spread, how many lives they would touch, how much change could grow from one simple act of kindness. Mrs. Thompson watched her classroom with new awareness. Monday morning, noting how Marcus sat straighter in his chair, how Emily's kindness had somehow made him more present, more engaged, she observed their quiet interaction during morning work. Saw the small smile they shared, saw how friendship could transform a child's entire way of being in the world. Her 20 years of teaching experience, helping her recognize the profound impact of feeling seen, feeling cared for, feeling valued. During lunch period, other students began noticing the changes in their quiet. Classmate noticed how Marcus no longer tried to disappear, noticed how Emily's friendship had given him a kind of permission to exist more fully. Some of them remembered times he had declined invitations to birthday parties, remembered times he had made excuses about not being hungry, remembered signs they hadn't understood until now. Ms. Thompson? Jenny Martinez approached her teacher's desk after class, her face serious. Beyond her 8 years, my mom always packs extra cookies. Can I share them? The question carried weight beyond simple snacks. Mrs. Thompson recognized the beginning of something important, recognized how children's natural empathy, when awakened, could create waves of change. That's very thoughtful, Jenny, she replied carefully. Sharing is always special. Emily and Marcus had created their own quiet routine. Emily's mother continuing to pack extra carefully crafted sandwiches, the two children sharing lunch, sharing stories, sharing the kind of friendship that could only grow from genuine understanding. Sarah picked up more hospital shifts to cover the extra groceries, her daughter's daily reports of Marcus's growing confidence-making. Every extra hour worth the effort. Ms. Thompson began noticing other things too. Noticed how some children grew quieter during lunch, discussions about weekend plans. Noticed how some avoided talk about after-school activities. Noticed how poverty could hide behind clean but worn clothes, behind careful excuses, behind small withdrawals. She began keeping granola bars in her desk, began thinking about how systems could change, began planning how to address bigger issues. The classroom dynamics shifted. Subtly, other students drawn to the quiet friendship between Emily and Marcus, drawn to the gentle kindness they witnessed, drawn to the opportunity to be part of something good. Jenny started bringing her extra cookies. Kevin began sharing his apple slices. Sophia offered part of her lunch to another quiet classmate. Small acts of generosity spreading like ripples in a pond. Something's changing, Mrs. Thompson shared during a staff meeting, carefully describing what she had observed in her classroom, carefully protecting her students' dignity, while raising awareness about larger issues, carefully suggesting ways the school could better support families in need. Other teachers began nodding, began sharing their own observations, began recognizing similar patterns in their own classrooms. Emily noticed the changes too, noticed how other children began sitting at their lunch table, noticed how Marcus relaxed more each day, noticed how their simple act of sharing had somehow given others permission to be kinder. Mom, she told Sarah over dinner, it's like everyone remembered how to share at once. Her mother smiled, understanding how children's natural compassion, when awakened, could transform entire communities. Marcus felt the changes most profoundly, felt how Emily's friendship had somehow made him visible in a good way, felt how her kindness had created a space where he could exist more fully, felt how sharing lunch had become about more than just food. His father noticed too, noticed his son's straighter shoulders, noticed his returning smile, noticed how friendship could feed more than just physical hungers. Thompson created a lesson about community, about sharing, about how small kindnesses could make big differences without ever mentioning Marcus or Emily without ever highlighting individual circumstances, without ever compromising anyone's dignity. She watched her students engage with the ideas, watched them begin to understand deeper truths about compassion, about community, about care. The school counselor stopped by Mrs. Thompson's classroom. Having heard about the changes, having noticed the shifting dynamics, having recognized the opportunity to create more systematic support, we need to think bigger, she suggested, need to find ways to help that go beyond individual kindness. Ms. Thompson agreed, sharing her observations, sharing her concerns, sharing her hope that this organic movement could lead to lasting change. Other parents began noticing, began asking questions, began offering help. Jenny's mother called the school, asking how she could support families in need. Kevin's father suggested organizing a food drive. Sophia's parents offered to coordinate weekend meal support. The ripples of two children's friendship spreading wider, touching more lives, creating more possibilities for change. Emily shared these developments with her mother each evening, Sarah listening with pride, knowing that their own experience with need had somehow helped her daughter become a catalyst for change. "Sometimes, sweetie," she said, as they prepared the next day's lunches, "the biggest changes start with the smallest actions." Emily nodded, understanding more deeply now how true those words were. Ms. Thompson watched it all unfold, watched how Emily and Marcus's quiet friendship had sparked something larger, watched how their simple act of sharing had awakened her school's collective conscience, watched how children's natural kindness, when supported, could transform an entire community. She began documenting these changes, began gathering evidence, began building a case for more systematic support, because sometimes awareness needed a catalyst, sometimes compassion needed an example, sometimes communities needed a reminder of its own heart. And as the school days progressed, as more children joined in the sharing, as more adults recognized the need, as more support systems began to form, they all understood that something extraordinary was happening, something that had started with 2 children and a shared lunch, something that would continue to grow and change and transform their entire school community. Marcus sat in class now, participating more fully, engaging, more openly, existing more completely. His friendship with Emily having somehow given him permission to be fully present. His father's worried shoulders relaxing slightly as other parents reached out, as community began to form, as isolation began to dissolve. Mrs. Thompson watched this transformation, understanding that sometimes the greatest teachings came not from lessons, but from children's simple acts of kindness, because sometimes the smallest actions could trigger the largest changes. Sometimes the simplest sharing could inspire the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for community transformation, and as awareness spread, as support grew, as change began to take root, they all understood that something beautiful was unfolding, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just their school, but their understanding of what community could mean, what kindness could achieve, what change could look like when sparked by the simple act of sharing lunch. Word spread through the school hallways like a gentle wave each day, bringing new awareness, new understanding, new opportunities for kindness. Mrs. Thompson arrived early one morning to find a group of students waiting outside her classroom. Jenny, Sophia, and Kevin leading what they called the Sharing Club, their young faces serious with purpose, their backpacks full of extra snacks, their hearts open to helping others. "We want to do it right," Jenny explained as they presented their idea. Like Emily did. They understood instinctively the importance of dignity, the need for discretion, the way kindness worked best when it felt natural. Mrs. Thompson listened with growing pride as her students outlined their plans for making sure no one went hungry while protecting everyone's privacy. Emily watched this development with quiet amazement, her mother's extra shifts having taught her the true cost of helping others, having shown her how community could multiply individual efforts. Having demonstrated how small acts could grow into movements, "You started something beautiful," Sarah told her daughter, as they prepared their now familiar extra lunches. Something bigger than sandwiches. Marcus, too, observed the changes, feeling less alone now, understanding that his situation wasn't unique, seeing how others faced similar challenges. His friendship with Emily, having somehow opened doors to wider connections, having created space for others to share their stories, having shown how vulnerability could become strength when met with kindness. The school principal called a staff meeting to address what teachers had been reporting: the growing awareness of food insecurity, the organic response from students, the need for more systematic support. "Our children are teaching us," she said, her voice carrying emotion, "teaching us about community, about caring, about change." Mrs. Thompson shared her observations watching. Understanding spread through the room. Parents began reaching out. Jenny's mother organizing a weekend backpack program. Kevin's father establishing a discreet food pantry in the school. Sophia's parents coordinating with local businesses to provide supplies. Sarah attended these meetings despite her exhaustion after hospital shifts. Her experience with need helping shape programs that would protect dignity while providing support. "It's not just about food anymore," Mrs. Thompson observed during one such meeting, watching parents, teachers, and administrators work together. "It's about recognizing how community should work." Others nodded, understanding how two children sharing lunch had somehow awakened their collective responsibility, had reminded them of connections they'd forgotten, had shown them what was possible. Emily and Marcus remained at the heart of it all, their friendship growing stronger, their simple act of sharing having sparked something profound, their example inspiring others to look around, to notice, to act. Marcus's father attended, a parent meeting his initial reluctance overcome by the genuine care he encountered, his isolation beginning to dissolve. As other parents reached out, as support systems formed, as community grew, the Sharing Club expanded their mission beyond food, began noticing other needs, began finding ways to help, began showing how children's natural empathy, when supported, could transform an entire school culture. Mrs. Thompson guided them gently, helping them maintain balance between enthusiasm and discretion, between helping and respecting, between change and dignity. Sarah watched her daughter flourish in this new environment, watched how giving, despite their own struggles, had somehow enriched their lives, watched how community, when awakened, could lift everyone. "Sometimes," she told Emily, as they added extra sandwiches to their grocery list, "helping others helps us remember who we are." Emily nodded, understanding more deeply now what her mother had always taught here. Rather, teachers began incorporating lessons about community, about sharing, about social responsibility, not as separate units, but as natural extensions of their regular curriculum, watching their students engage with these ideas, watching them develop deeper understanding, watching them transform awareness into action. Ms. Thompson shared her approaches, helping colleagues find ways to support this organic movement. Marcus's father found himself surrounded by support, not charity, but genuine community, not handouts, but shared resources, not pity, but understanding. His son's improving grades, his returning smile, his growing confidence, all testifying to the power of connection, all showing how isolation could be transformed by kindness, all demonstrating how community could heal what circumstance had wounded. The school nurse joined the effort, creating a system for identifying needs, discreetly addressing concerns, connecting families with resources. "It's like the children reminded us," she told Mrs. Thompson, "reminded us how to care for each other." They worked together, developing protocols that would outlast this moment, creating structures that would support future students, ensuring this movement would have lasting impact, because sometimes awareness needed to become action, sometimes compassion needed to become system, sometimes community needed to become commitment. And as the school days progressed, as more families joined the effort, as more support structures formed, they all understood that something extraordinary was continuing to unfold, something that had started with 2 children and a shared lunch, something that would continue to grow and change and transform their entire community. Emily and Marcus watched it all unfold, their friendship. Having somehow catalyzed this transformation, their simple act of sharing having awakened something larger. Their example having shown what was possible. Mrs. Thompson observed them during lunch period, watched how their table had become a center of natural inclusion, watched how other students gravitated toward the quiet revolution they had started, because sometimes the smallest actions could inspire the largest changes. Sometimes the simplest sharing could awaken the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for community transformation. And as support grew, as systems formed, as change took root, they all understood that something beautiful was still unfolding, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just their school, but their understanding of what community could mean, what kindness could achieve, what change could look like when sparked by the simple act of sharing lunch and nurtured by the collective will to make a difference. The school cafeteria buzzed with new energy as local business owners gathered for an early morning meeting. Jenny's mother, Lisa Martinez, standing at the podium sharing the story of how 2 children's friendship had awakened their community's conscience. Oh, it started with a sandwich, she explained, but it's become about so much more. Around the room, heads nodded as parents, teachers, and community leaders recognized their collective responsibility. Mr. Chen from the corner grocery store was the first to stand. "I can provide fresh fruit weekly," he offered, thinking of his own childhood struggles, thinking of how community had helped his family survive, thinking of how giving back completed a circle of care. Others followed local restaurants, pledging prepared meals, the bakery promising daily bread, the supermarket offering regular donations. The simple act of sharing expanding into a network of support arms. Thompson sat beside Emily and Marcus during the meeting, watching their faces as they realized how their small gesture had grown. "You see," she whispered, as another business owner stood to offer help, "this is how community is supposed to work." The children listened with growing understanding, their friendship having somehow sparked something larger than themselves, their example having shown what was possible. Sarah attended despite having just finished her night shift at the hospital. Her nurse's uniform a reminder of how many in their community worked hard yet still struggled. "We need to make it sustainable," she suggested during the planning session, "need to create systems that will last." Her experience with both giving and receiving help, adding weight to her words, adding wisdom to the developing programs. The principal unveiled plans for a permanent food pantry disguised as a community sharing center to protect dignity while providing essential support. "Our students showed us the importance of how we help," she explained, "showed us that giving works best when it preserves pride." Marcus's father, sitting quietly in the back, felt tears form as he recognized how thoroughly his son's story had been understood. Local businesses began organizing delivery schedules, coordinating donations, developing systems that would ensure steady support. "It's not charity," Mr. Chen insisted during these discussions. "It's community." Others agreed, understanding how this distinction mattered, understanding how their effort needed to feel like neighbors helping neighbors, understanding how dignity remained essential to true assistance. Emily and Marcus watched their small revolution continue to grow their friendship, having created space for larger conversations. Their example having shown how simple kindness could transform into organized action. Their story having somehow awakened their community's best instincts. "Mom," Emily whispered, as another business pledged support. "Did you know this would happen?" Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, pride mixing with wonder. The sharing club presented their ideas to the gathered adults, explaining how students could help, discreetly describing systems they had already developed, showing wisdom beyond their years. "We want to help like Emily did," Jenny explained. With respect, the adults listened with growing appreciation, understanding that sometimes children could teach the most profound lessons about compassion, about dignity, about caroms. Thompson documented everything, knowing this model could help other schools, knowing this movement deserved recording, knowing this transformation needed sharing. She watched her students lead discussions, watched them demonstrate natural empathy, watched them show adults how community could work when guided by genuine care and concern. For others, Marcus's father finally stood to speak, his voice shaking slightly as he shared their story, as he explained how isolation had deepened their struggles, as he described how his son's friendship with Emily had opened doors to support each. "Hadn't known how to ask for community matters," he concluded, "more than I remembered." Around the room, eyes glistened with recognition, with understanding, with shared humanity. The meeting evolved into active planning committees, forming schedules, developing systems, creating structures that would support families while protecting privacy. Sarah joined the coordination team, her healthcare experience helping shape protocols, her personal understanding of need helping ensure programs would truly serve those they aimed to help. Her daughter's example inspiring her to give despite her own tiredness. Local media arrived, drawn by word of mouth, curious about how a children's friendship had sparked community transformation. Emily and Marcus sat together while cameras rolled their simple act of sharing, having somehow created headlines their story, demonstrating how small kindnesses could lead to bigger changes. Their example inspiring others to look around their own communities, to notice, to act, because sometimes awareness needed to become organization, sometimes compassion needed to become system, sometimes community needed to become commitment. And as the meeting progressed, as plans formed, as support structures developed, they all understood that something extraordinary was continuing to unfold, something that had started with 2 children and a shared lunch, something that would continue to grow and change and transform their entire community. Mr. Chen offered his store as a central collection point, other businesses quickly joining the network, creating a web of support that would catch families before they fell too far. The principal coordinated with social services, ensuring their school's program would complement existing resources. The Sharing Club expanded their mission, their young members showing adults how natural giving could be. Sarah watched it all unfold, her extra hospital shifts having taught her the true cost of helping her daughters, courage having shown her how small acts could grow her experience with need, having helped her understand how to build effective support. Sometimes, she told Emily, as they listened to plans develop, the biggest changes start with the smallest. Hearts, Emily nodded, understanding now how completely true those words were, because sometimes the smallest actions could inspire the largest changes, sometimes the simplest sharing could awaken the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for community transformation, and as support grew, as systems formed, as change took root, they all understood that something beautiful was still unfolding, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just their school, but their entire community's understanding of what neighbors could mean, what kindness could achieve, what change could look like when sparked by the simple act of sharing lunch and nurtured by collective commitment to care. 1 month after the community meeting, the school's newly established Sharing Center had become more than just a food pantry. Jenny noticed first how students began bringing extra school supplies, began offering outgrown clothes, began sharing books and toys, the space transforming into something that represented their growing understanding of community. "It's like we remembered how to take care of each other," she told Mrs. Thompson, Her young face serious with this realization, Emily watched. The evolution, with quiet amazement, saw how her simple act of sharing lunch had somehow awakened something larger in her classmates, saw how kindness could multiply when given space to grow her mother's wisdom about how sharing creates more sharing. Proving true in ways neither of them had imagined, Sarah listened to her daughter's daily reports. Her extra hospital shifts now helping fund not just extra lunches, but additional supplies for others. Marcus found himself at the center of this transformation. Not as someone who needed help, but as someone who helped others, his own experience having taught him how to recognize need, having shown him how to offer support discreetly, having given him wisdom about how community could heal what circumstance had wounded sometimes, he told Emily during lunch. Helping others helps us. Remember, we're not alone. Ms. Thompson observed new connections forming in her classroom, watched students notice when someone needed pencils or notebooks, watched them find ways to share that protected dignity, watched them demonstrate understanding beyond their years about how community should work. They're not just sharing things, she told the principal, they're sharing hope. The administrator nodded, seeing how this movement had transformed their school's culture. The Sharing Club expanded their mission beyond food and supplies, began organizing study groups, began creating friendship circles, began showing how support could address more than just material needs. Jenny, Sophia, and Kevin led these efforts, their natural empathy having evolved into leadership, their understanding of community having grown deeper, their commitment to helping others having become part of who they were. Sarah found herself coordinating with other parents, her healthcare experience, helping identify needs beyond hunger, her own journey through hardship, helping shape programs that addressed whole families, her daughter's example inspiring her to give more of herself. Despite her exhaustion, community means seeing the whole picture, she explained during a parent meeting, means understanding how all needs connect. Local businesses continued their support but expanded their involvement. Mr. Chen's grocery stores became a homework hub. After school, the bakery offered weekend cooking classes. The bookstore started a book-sharing program, their contributions showing how community support could enrich lives beyond basic needs, could create opportunities for growth, could build connections that strengthened everyone. Marcus's father discovered skills he hadn't known. He had found himself teaching basic home repairs to other parents, found himself sharing his expertise about budgeting, found himself moving from receiving help to giving it. His isolation transforming into connection, his struggle becoming strength, his experience becoming wisdom that could guide others. We all have something to give, he told Marcus. We all have ways to help. The school nurse partnered with Sarah to establish health education programs, their combined expertise helping families navigate medical resources, helping connect them with care, helping ensure that physical well-being became part of the community support system. Health and hunger connect, Sarah explained during one session, just like all aspects of community care connect. Emily and Marcus watched their friendship continue to grow, their shared experience having created something larger than themselves. Their example having shown others what was possible, their story having somehow inspired an entire community to reimagine what caring for each other could mean. Do you think this is what Mom meant? Emily asked Sarah about how kindness multiplies. Her mother nodded, understanding exactly what her daughter meant. Ms. Thompson documented these developments, watched how sharing had expanded beyond material things, watched how students began sharing knowledge, skills, friendship, watched how their natural capacity for kindness, when supported, could transform an entire school culture. They're teaching us, she told her colleagues, teaching us about what community really means. The Sharing Center evolved, organized by students, managed by parents, supported by businesses, its shelves holding not just food, but school supplies, clothes, books, toys. Its space becoming a symbol of how community could work when everyone contributed, when everyone cared, when everyone understood their connection to each other. It's not just about what we share, Jenny explained. It's about how we share it. Because sometimes support needed to grow beyond basic needs. Sometimes care needed to encompass whole lives. Sometimes community needed to recognize all its resources, and as the movement expanded, as connections deepened, as understanding grew, they all recognized that something extraordinary was continuing to unfold. Something that had started with 2 children and a shared lunch. Something that would continue to grow and change and transform their entire community. Marcus found strength in giving back his own experience, having taught him compassion, his friendship with Emily, having shown him possibility, his role in the community, having given him purpose, helping others. He told his father, "Helps us too." His dad nodded, understanding how their journey through hardship had given them gifts they could now share with others. Sarah watched her daughter flourish, watched how, giving despite their own struggles, had enriched their lives, watched how community, when awakened, could lift everyone higher. Sometimes, she told Emily, as they prepared supplies for the sharing center. The biggest changes start with the smallest understandings. Emily nodded, seeing now how completely their simple act of sharing had transformed into something profound, because sometimes the smallest actions could inspire the largest changes. Sometimes the simplest sharing could awaken the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for community transformation. And as support grew, as connections deepened, as change took root, they all understood that something beautiful was still unfolding, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just their school, but their entire community's understanding of what caring could mean, what kindness could achieve, what change could look like when sparked by the simple act of sharing and nurtured by collective commitment to care for each other in all ways possible. The local newspaper article caught everyone by surprise. "Students transform school through kindness." The headline read, featuring a photo of Emily and Marcus sitting at their lunch table, the story of their friendship having somehow captured public imagination. Mrs. Thompson watched her students read the article. During morning class, saw how they absorbed this recognition of their impact, saw how they understood for the first time how far their simple act of sharing had reached other schools. "Are calling," the principal announced during a staff meeting, wanting to know how to create their own programs. She shared emails from administrators across the district. Their interest sparked by the article, their questions focusing not just on logistics, but on the spirit that had made this movement successful. "They see it's different," Mrs. Thompson explained. "See how it started with children's natural kindness." Emily and Marcus found themselves giving presentations to visiting teachers and students, their story somehow more powerful. When told in their own words, Sarah watched her daughter speak about sharing despite struggle, about helping despite hardship, about how community meant everyone contributing what they could sometimes. She told the visitors, "Even when you don't have much, you have enough to share." The Sharing Club members became ambassadors, Jenny, Sophia, and Kevin teaching other schools how to start their own programs, explaining the importance of dignity, describing systems that worked, showing how student leadership could transform school culture. "It's not just about giving things," Jenny explained to a group of visiting students. "It's about giving care," their young voices, carrying wisdom earned through experience. Marcus's father spoke at community meetings, sharing their journey from isolation to connection, from need to contribution, from receiving help to giving it his story, demonstrating how proper support could transform lives, could restore dignity, could create ripples of positive change. "My son's friendship with Emily," he told listeners, "showed me what community really means." His words, touching hearts, opening minds, inspiring action, local businesses. shared their models with other neighborhoods. Mr. Chen, explaining how his grocery store had become more than just a shop, had become a community hub, had become part of a network of care. It's good business, he told other store owners, but it's better community. His example showing how commerce and compassion could work together, could strengthen each other, could create sustainable changes. Hera found herself consulting with other school nurses, helping them understand how health food and community interconnected her experience, both giving and receiving help, adding depth to her guidance. Her daughter's example inspiring her to share their story, despite her natural privacy. Sometimes, she told them, the best programs grow from understanding both sides of need, her wisdom helping shape new initiatives. Ms. Thompson documented everything, created guides for other teachers, developed resources for other schools, shared lessons learned about how to support student-led kindness initiatives. But remember, she cautioned during workshops, it has to come from the heart, has to grow naturally, has to maintain dignity. Her experience helping others understand the delicate balance between helping and empowering. The media attention grew, television stations visiting the school reporters, interviewing students, photographers, capturing moments of sharing. Emily and Marcus remained at the heart of it all. Their friendship having somehow sparked something that continued to grow, their simple act of sharing lunch, having inspired a movement. Their example showing others what was possible when kindness led the way. Visiting educators watched the Sharing Center in action, saw how students managed it, saw how it had become more than just a food pantry, saw how it represented their understanding of comprehensive community care. They've created something remarkable. One principal observed, something that addresses whole needs, the students giving tours, explaining systems, demonstrating how their program worked, because sometimes inspiration needed witnesses, sometimes change needed examples, sometimes community needed models, and as their story spread, as other schools adopted their approach, as more communities awakened to possibility, they all understood that something extraordinary was continuing to unfold, something that had started with 2 children and a shared lunch. Something that would continue to grow and change and transform not just their school, but schools everywhere. Jenny and the Sharing Club created a handbook for other students, their young voices sharing wisdom about how to notice need, how to offer help, how to build community. Remember, they wrote, everyone has something to give, everyone has something to need, everyone has something to share. Their understanding helping guide other young leaders, helping inspire other movements, helping create other transformations. Marcus found strength in telling their story, discovered how sharing their journey could help others, found purpose in showing how friendship could transform lives. It's not just about food, he explained to visiting students. It's about seeing each other, really seeing each other. His words carrying weight, earned through experience, carrying hope, learned through healing, carrying wisdom gained through community. Sarah watched it all unfold, her extra hospital shifts now feeling lighter. Somehow her tiredness balanced by purpose. Her daughter's courage having sparked something larger than their family, having shown how small acts could grow, having demonstrated how community could work when everyone contributed what they could. Sometimes, she told Emily, change just needs someone brave enough to start it, because sometimes the smallest actions could inspire the largest. Changes, sometimes the simplest sharing, could awaken the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for transformation beyond their own community, and as their story spread, as their model inspired others, as their example showed what was possible, they all understood that something beautiful was still unfolding, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just their school, not just their community, but communities everywhere, showing what kindness could achieve, what change could look like when sparked by simple acts of sharing and nurtured by collective commitment to care. The city council meeting room buzzed with anticipation as Emily and Marcus prepared to speak their story, having led to this moment where their school's program would become a model for citywide implementation. Sarah sat in the audience watching. Her daughter approached the podium, her nurse's uniform still on from her shift, their own struggles having somehow transformed into strength that could help others. It started with a sandwich. Emily began, her voice clear and confident, but it became about how community should work. Marcus stood beside her, their friendship now a symbol of what was possible when kindness led the way, their simple act of sharing having grown into something neither could have imagined that first day in the cafeteria. Their example having shown how small actions could create lasting change. Thompson watched her students present their program, watched them explain systems that protected dignity, watched them demonstrate wisdom beyond their years about how communities could care for all members. They're not just sharing a program, she whispered to the principal. They're sharing a vision. Around the room, heads nodded as council members recognized the profound impact of what these children had created. Sarah had been offered a new position at the hospital, coordinating their community health outreach program. Her experience with both giving and receiving help having uniquely qualified her to bridge gaps between healthcare and community needs. Your daughter showed us all something important, her supervisor had said, showed us how to really see each other. Emily's example having transformed not just their family, but entire systems. Marcus's father found himself leading workshops teaching other parents about financial literacy, about home repairs, about how to move from receiving help to giving it his own journey. Having given him expertise that could guide others, community lifted us, he told participants. Now we lift others, his son watching. With pride as the man who had once hidden their struggles, now helped others face theirs with dignity. The Sharing Club had evolved into a permanent student leadership program. Jenny, Sophia, and Kevin training younger students to carry forward their work, their understanding of community care having grown deeper, their commitment to helping others having become part of the school's culture. We're not just sharing things anymore, Jenny explained during a training session. We're sharing responsibility for each other. Mr. Chen's grocery store had become a model for other businesses, showing how commerce and compassion could work together, showing how community support could strengthen everyone. When we help others, we help ourselves, he told a gathering of local business owners. When we strengthen community, we strengthen business. His example inspiring others to rethink their role in neighborhood support M's. Thompson documented these developments, watched how their program had transformed from emergency response to permanent structure, watched how student leadership had become institutional culture, watched how their school had become a model for others. They didn't just create a program, she told the council. They created a new way of thinking about community. Emily and Marcus continued their friendship, their bond having deepened through their shared experience, their understanding of community having grown richer, their commitment to helping others having become part of who they were. Sometimes, Emily told Marcus during lunch, I can't believe it all started with us. He smiled, understanding exactly what she meant, their simple act of sharing having sparked something extraordinary. Sarah watched her daughter flourish, watched how giving, despite their own struggles, had enriched their lives, watched how community, when awakened, could lift everyone higher. You showed us all something important, she told Emily as they prepared for another community meeting. Showed us that change can start with anyone brave enough to care. Emily nodded, understanding. Now the full impact of their simple beginning, the City Council voted unanimously to adopt their model, allocating resources to help other schools establish similar programs, their decision reflecting understanding that this wasn't just about food, wasn't just about supplies, wasn't just about immediate needs, but about creating sustainable community care. These children, one council member said, showed us what We should have known all along, because sometimes change needed to become permanent. Sometimes kindness needed to become policy. Sometimes community needed to become commitment. And as their program became official, as their model spread, as their example inspired others, they all understood that something extraordinary had become lasting, something that had started with 2 children and a shared lunch, something that would continue to grow and change and transform communities everywhere. Marcus found himself speaking to other students who faced similar struggles, his own experience having taught him how to offer hope, his friendship with Emily having shown him how to build bridges, his role in the community having given him purpose. It gets better, he told them, especially when we help each other. His words carrying weight earned through experiences. Era's new position allowed her to create programs that addressed whole family needs, her understanding of struggle having helped her. Her design support that truly worked her daughter's courage, having inspired her to think bigger. Her experience with both sides of need, having helped her build bridges between systems. Sometimes, she told her healthcare colleagues, the best solutions come from those who've lived the questions, because sometimes the smallest actions could inspire the largest changes. Sometimes the simplest sharing could awaken the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for permanent transformation, and as their program became policy, as their model became standard, as their example became inspiration, they all understood that something beautiful had become permanent, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just their school, not just their community, but communities everywhere, showing what kindness could achieve, what change could look like, when sparked by simple acts of sharing and nurtured by collective commitment to care. The State Education Conference room filled with superintendents and administrators from across the region, all gathered to hear how a simple act of sharing lunch had transformed into a model for community care. Emily and Marcus sat beside Mrs. Thompson, their story now part of a larger conversation about how schools could better serve their communities, their friendship having somehow sparked a revolution in how people thought about supporting each other. The key is student leadership, Mrs. Thompson explained, showing slides of the Sharing Club in action. When children lead with kindness, adults remember how to follow. Around the room, educators took notes, their questions focusing not just on logistics, but on the spirit that had made this program successful, their interest sparked by the remarkable results their schools had witnessed in Emily and Marcus's districts. Erin presented the health impact data, her new position at the hospital, having allowed her to track how comprehensive community support could improve overall well-being. When we address whole needs, she explained, we see whole healing. Her experience with both struggling and helping, having given her unique insight into how systems could better serve everyone, her daughters. Example having shown how simple acts could create lasting change. Marcus's father shared their family's journey, his voice steady now as he described their transformation from isolation to connection, from need to contribution, from receiving help to giving. It this program, he told the gathered educators, doesn't just feed children, it feeds community. His words carrying weight, earned through experience, carrying hope, earned through healing, carrying wisdom, gained through transformation. The Sharing Club members had trained student leaders from other schools, Jenny, Sophia, and Kevin, now leading workshops on how to establish and maintain programs that protected dignity while providing support. Remember, Jenny told a group of visiting students, it's not about what we give, it's about how we care. Their young voices carrying authority earned through successful implementation. Mr. Chen spoke about business involvement, explaining how local commerce could strengthen community, how neighborhood support could improve economic health, how caring for others could benefit everyone. It's not charity, he insisted. It's investment in our shared future. Other business owners nodded, understanding how this model could transform their own communities. Emily watched it all unfold, her mother's words about how kindness multiplies, proving true in ways neither of them had imagined, their simple act of sharing having grown into something that was changing how entire school systems approached community care. Sometimes, she told Marcus during a break, I still can't believe how big this has become. He smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. Thompson had created comprehensive guides for other schools, detailing not just procedures but philosophies, explaining not just systems but spirits, showing not just what to do, but how to nurture the kind of student leadership that had made their program successful. The children showed us the way, she told her colleagues. Our job was just to help their kindness grow. The State Department of Education had taken notice, establishing grants to help schools implement similar programs, their recognition of this model's success leading to policy changes that would support community-based initiatives. These children, the Education Secretary announced, have shown us what education can really mean. Their example inspiring systematic changes. ARA's healthcare programs had become models for other hospitals, showing how medical care could better integrate with community support, showing how healing happened best within networks of care, showing how institutional systems could learn from grassroots wisdom. Sometimes, she told her colleagues, the best solutions come from the simplest understandings. Her daughter's courage having inspired institutional change, Marcus found strength in sharing their story, discovered how their journey could help others, found purpose in showing how friendship could transform lives. It's not just about food, he explained during panel discussions. It's about seeing each other as people who matter. His words touching hearts, opening minds, inspiring action across districts and communities. The Sharing Center model had been adopted by schools throughout the state, each one adapting it to their specific needs, each one maintaining the core principles of dignity, student leadership, and comprehensive care, each one showing how community support could work when guided by kindness and wisdom. They've created something remarkable, one administrator observed, something that actually changes lives, because sometimes change needed to become standard, sometimes kindness needed to become policy, sometimes community needed to become commitment. And as their model spread, as their example inspired others, as their story touched more lives, they all understood that something extraordinary had become permanent, something that had started with 2 children and a shared lunch, something that would continue to grow and change and transform communities everywhere. Emily and Marcus remained at the heart of it all, their friendship having shown what was possible when kindness led the way, their simple act of sharing having inspired a movement, their example showing others what could happen when communities remembered how to care. You know what I love most about all this? Emily asked Marcus during another presentation, that it's still growing, still changing, still helping. Sarah watched her daughter flourish, watched how giving, despite their own struggles, had enriched their lives, watched how community, when awakened, could lift everyone higher. Sometimes, she told the conference attendees, the biggest changes start with the smallest hearts. Her words carrying truth, learned through experience, carrying hope, earned through struggle, carrying wisdom, gained through transformation, because sometimes the smallest actions could inspire the largest changes. Sometimes the simplest sharing could awaken the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for systematic transformation. And as their model became standard, as their example became policy, as their story became inspiration, they all understood that something beautiful had become permanent, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just schools, not just communities, but entire systems, showing what kindness could achieve, what change could look like when sparked by simple acts of sharing and nurtured by collective commitment to care. The National Education Conference Main Hall fell silent as Emily and Marcus took the stage, their story now reaching an audience of thousands. Their simple act of sharing lunch having become a blueprint for national change, Mrs. Thompson watched from the front row, remembering that first cafeteria moment, remembering how two children's kindness had somehow awakened an entire country's conscience. "We never meant to start a movement," Emily began, her voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. "We just knew what it felt like to need help." Marcus stood beside her, their friendship now a symbol of what communities could achieve when kindness led the way, their example having inspired schools across the country to rethink how they supported their students, their families, their neighborhoods. Sarah sat in the audience, still wearing her hospital administrator badge, having just finished presenting healthcare data to another conference session. Her research showing how their comprehensive community care model had improved not just nutrition, but overall well-being. Not just immediate needs, but long-term outcomes. Not just individual lives, but entire community health metrics. The program works because it starts with heart, Marcus explained. To the gathered educators, his voice steady with conviction, earned through experience. It works because it remembers dignity. Around the room, heads nodded as administrators recognized the profound truth in his words, understood how this child-led initiative had succeeded where so many adult-designed programs had failed. Jenny and the Sharing Club members had been invited to lead workshops teaching other student leaders from across the country how to establish and maintain programs that protected pride while providing support. "Remember," Jenny told her young audience, "we're not just sharing things, we're sharing hope." Their sessions becoming the most attended of the conference. Stur Chen presented alongside other business leaders, showing how local commerce could partner with schools, showing how community support could strengthen economic health, showing how caring for others could benefit everyone. "This isn't charity," he insisted. "This is smart business. This is strong community. This is sustainable change." His model inspiring businesses nationwide. Ms. Thompson shared their documentation, explaining how schools could nurture student leadership, explaining how communities could build sustainable support, explaining how systems could protect dignity while providing help. "But remember," she cautioned, "it has to grow from genuine care. It has to maintain the spirit these children showed us." Her guides becoming standard resources for schools nationwide. Sarah's healthcare integration model had caught the attention of national hospital systems. Her approach to combining medical care with community support, her understanding of how healing happened best within networks of care, her insight into how institutions could learn from grassroots wisdom. Sometimes, she told hospital administrators, the most effective solutions come from listening to those we serve. Emily and Marcus found themselves featured in national news, their story touching hearts across the country, their friendship demonstrating how simple kindness could transform communities, their example showing how young people could lead meaningful change. "We just wanted to help each other," Emily explained during interviews. "We just knew everyone deserves to eat lunch with dignity." The Department of Education had established a national grant program, helping schools implement similar initiatives. Their recognition of this model's success leading to policy changes that would support community-based care across the country. "These children," the Secretary of Education announced, "have shown us a better way to build strong communities." Their example inspiring systematic change nationwide because sometimes change needed to reach everyone. Sometimes kindness needed to become standard. Sometimes community needed to become national policy. And as their model spread, as their example inspired others, as their story touched more lives, they all understood that something extraordinary had become universal. Something that had started with two children and a shared lunch. Something that would continue to grow and change and transform communities everywhere. Marcus's father had been invited to speak at national poverty conferences. His journey from struggling parent to community leader, his transformation from receiving help to giving it his wisdom about how proper support could restore dignity, could rebuild lives, could create ripples of positive change. My son and his friend. He told audiences, showed us what community really means. His words inspiring new approaches to family support, the Sharing Club model had been adopted by schools in every state, each one adapting it to their specific needs, each one maintaining the core principles of dignity, student leadership, and comprehensive care, each one showing how community support could work when guided by kindness and wisdom. They've created a revolution. One national educator observed, a revolution in how we care for each other. Sarah watched her daughter address the national audience, watched how their own struggles had transformed into strength, watched how community, when awakened, could lift an entire nation. Sometimes, she told fellow healthcare administrators, the biggest changes start with the smallest understanding. Her words carrying truth, learned through experience, carrying hope, earned through struggle, carrying wisdom gained through transformation. Because sometimes the smallest actions could inspire the largest changes. Sometimes the simplest sharing could awaken the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for national transformation. And as their model became standard, as their example became policy, as their story became inspiration, they all understood that something beautiful had become universal, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just schools, not just communities, but an entire nation, showing what kindness could achieve, what change could look like when sparked by simple acts of sharing and nurtured by collective commitment. To Karimali and Marcus remained grounded in their original purpose, their friendship having shown what was possible when kindness led the way, their simple act of sharing having inspired a movement, their example showing others what could happen when communities remembered how to care. You know what amazes me most? Emily asked Marcus during another presentation, that it all started with just wanting to share lunch. He smiled, understanding exactly what she meant, their small gesture having grown into something neither could have imagined. 1 year after that first shared sandwich, Emily and Marcus stood in their old school cafeteria, now transformed into a gathering space for a national celebration of what their simple act of kindness had achieved. Sarah watched her daughter from the audience, her nurse's uniform replaced by a business suit, her new role as National Healthcare Community Coordinator, a direct result of how their small gesture had grown into a movement that transformed the country. It's still about lunch, Emily began addressing the gathered crowd of educators, healthcare workers, business leaders, and government officials. It's still about making sure no one sits alone with an empty lunchbox. Marcus stood beside her, their friendship having become a symbol of how communities could change when children led the way, their example having shown how simple kindness could transform entire systems. Ems Thompson sat in the front row, remembering that first quiet moment of sharing, remembering how she had watched 2 children teach an entire nation about community, about care, about connection. They didn't just create a program, she told the gathered audience. They reminded us of what we already knew in our hearts about how to take care of each other. The Sharing Club now existed in schools across the country. Jenny, Sophia, and Kevin, having trained thousands of student leaders, their model of dignity-centered support having become the standard for community care programs. Remember, Jenny told the new generation of leaders, it's not about what we give, it's about how we show people they matter, their wisdom continuing to guide implementation. Nationwide, Marcus's father addressed the conference, sharing their journey from struggle to strength, from isolation to connection, from receiving help to giving it. My son and his friend. He said his voice, carrying pride, showed us that community isn't just a word, it's an action, it's a choice, it's a commitment we make to each other. His words, touching hearts that understood how completely their lives had changed. Sarah presented the national impact data showing how their comprehensive approach had improved outcomes across every measure, showing how community-based support had transformed entire neighborhoods, showing how their simple model had created lasting positive change. Sometimes, she told the gathered officials, the most powerful solutions come from the simplest acts of kindness Mr. Chen and other business leaders shared. How their involvement had strengthened not just communities, but commerce. How caring for neighbors had improved every metric of success. How their investment in community had returned more than they could have imagined. These children, he said, taught us that good hearts make good business, his example continuing to inspire corporate responsibility nationwide. And Marcus visited their old lunch table, the spot where everything had started, where a simple shared sandwich had somehow sparked a revolution in how communities cared for each other. Sometimes, Emily said, touching the table's surface, I still can't believe it all started here. Marcus nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Their small gesture having grown into something extraordinary. The national program they had inspired had eliminated the phrase food insecurity from thousands of schools, had transformed how communities supported their members, had shown how student leadership could create lasting change. But it's not just about food, Marcus reminded the audience. It's about seeing each other as people who deserve care. His words carrying wisdom earned through experiences. Era watched her daughter address the nation's leaders, watched how their own struggles had become strength, watched how community, when awakened, could transform an entire country. You showed us all something important, she told Emily later. Showed us that anyone can start a revolution of kindness. Emily smiled, understanding now the full impact of their simple beginning, because sometimes change needed to become legacy, sometimes kindness needed to become culture, sometimes community needed to become standard. And as they celebrated this milestone, as they witnessed their impact, as they shared their story, one final time, they all understood that something extraordinary had become permanent, something that had started with 2 children and a shared lunch, something that would continue to grow and change and transform communities forever. Thompson had documented everything, created resources that would guide future generations, showed how simple kindness could transform entire systems. But remember, she told educators, it has to start with heart. It has to maintain the spirit these children showed us. Her words ensuring their example would continue to inspire change. The Sharing Club members prepared to graduate, passing their leadership to younger students, ensuring their program would continue, ensuring their message would endure, ensuring their revolution of kindness would grow. We learned. Jenny told the new leaders that everyone has something to give, everyone has something to need, everyone has something to share. Their understanding, continuing to guide new generations, Marcus found strength in their legacy, discovered how their story would help others, found purpose in showing how friendship could transform lives. It's still about that first lunch, he told the audience. Still about seeing someone who needs help and choosing to care. His words touching hearts that understood how simple kindness could change everything. Sarah watched it all unfold, her daughter's courage having sparked something larger than their family, having shown how small acts could grow, having demonstrated how community could work when everyone contributed what they could sometimes. She told the gathered leaders, change just needs someone brave enough to share a sandwich, her words carrying truth learned through their extraordinary journey, because sometimes the smallest actions could inspire the largest changes. Sometimes the simplest sharing could awaken the greatest giving. Sometimes 2 children's lunch could become a catalyst for permanent transformation. And as they celebrated their journey, as they witnessed their impact, as they shared their story, one final time, they all understood that something beautiful had become eternal, something that would continue to grow, something that would transform not just their school, not just their community, not just their nation, but the very way people understood what community could mean, what kindness could achieve, what change could look like when sparked by simple acts of sharing and nurtured by collective commitment to care for each other forever.